the primary question for me was, what is Maine's opportunity to contribute to reducing carbon emissions globally? This is it.
What does the opposition have for a plan? And it is absolutely zero. Not even a chicken scratch on the back of a napkin for a plan.
Wait, a Republican and a Democrat agreeing on a key issue in 2020? How can this be? Find out next on Clearing the Air. I'm Thorn Dickinson. I am excited about sharing with you authentic conversations from Mainers throughout the state about the value this project delivers. Welcome to a special multi-part episode of Clearing the Air. We're going to be talking about how this project has great support and opposition from both sides of the aisle. For the Republicans, we'll be speaking with Jim LaBrecque, and on the Democrat side, Ben Dudley. Last week, I talked to Paul Frederick up in Starks, and one of the things that he said and his reason for why people should believe that this project is good for people in Maine was that not only does Governor Mills support this project, but also Governor LePage. And I started to think, is there another issue that the two of them really have a common view on? And maybe your perspective first.
And the answer to that is absolutely, definitely no, I think. And that's a unique thing about this in particular project, is that for the first time we have the different parties coming together on opposite sides, a mix on both sides of the pros and cons. What other issue, Ben, have you ever seen that kind of a mix on since the 90s?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, to me, one of the sort of defining differences between the parties is about the role of government, the appropriate role of government. And people of good faith on both sides of the aisle. On the right, they think a more limited role for government. On the left, we think a more activist role for government. But here's an example where we agree. We've established these governmental structures to consider projects like these and determine, after a lengthy proceeding and with great expertise, determine where the public interest lies. And we've gone through that process with the DEP, the LUPC, and the PUC, and they're indicating to us where the public interest is. And Democrats and Republicans who believe in these structures are deferring to the experts here. It makes sense.
So what is it that is the biggest misconceptions you see? I would say, Ben, to you on the Democratic side, and then Jim, to you on the Republican side, with why they're still confused about why this project is good for Maine.
The opposition was on TV very early in this effort, long before there was a referendum, before the PUC even issued its order, and telling people that the project was damaging to the environment, and having certain organizations echo that and also say that the energy isn't clean energy. And that falsehood entered into the public consciousness. And so what we're having to do now is to undo that understanding and say, no, in actuality, this is a net positive to the environment by a lot. It's going to protect Maine forests, Maine wildlife, by virtue of reducing greenhouse gas impacts on our environment.
And how about you on the Republican side?
I'm with Ben on this, and that is the opposition got in early. And they understood one very important rule in the world of politics, and that is it's easier to convince somebody about something than it is to convince them later on that they were misled. Also, I think that the press is not as fair on these kinds of issues to be able to bring the real facts to the table. Okay? If it was, we wouldn't be here today. For instance, as the governor's technical advisor on energy for 8 years, and I get to speak a lot publicly, it seems like one newspaper would call and say, "What's your view, Mr. LaBrecque?" Right? But they ain't going to do that because they know what my view is, and that's not what they want to push. And that is harming this whole process, is harming the people of the state.
The other part of the story is that there are other interests involved here. the interests of people who are already generating the electricity we use every day. And these are people who are mostly producers of natural gas energy. And I'm not saying they're bad people, and I'm not calling them villains, but they have a financial stake in things staying just as they are. Whereas the public interest is in making things change. And the truth of this story is that Central Maine Power is on the side of making things change.
And I just don't understand why the press doesn't pick up on the fact that they have this opposition, but they do not have nothing for, not even a chicken scratch on the back of a napkin for a plan. Nothing. Where are you going to be able to get this kind of energy to continue our normal growth rate of electricity year over year? At the same time, we want to bend that curve way up to put heating and transportation, which is 3 times more energy than what we use for electricity right now. At the same time, you're decommissioning plants. That is a very dangerous situation for these people in opposition with no plan to be able to try and put Maine into.
So that's all for this episode of Clearing the Air. Pay attention next week for part 2. And if you haven't already, subscribe on YouTube to Clearing the Air.